I thought I was a pawn, easily discarded to score points with a 23-year-old intern. He never knew the billion-dollar trading algorithm I built had a heartbeat, answering only to me. At 9 in the morning, he stole 2 years of my work. By 4 in the afternoon, he left voicemails begging me to save him from federal prison. This is not a story about me crying. It is how one phone call crushed a Wall Street tyrant. Hello, loyal listeners of Boss Revenge Stories. We want to sincerely thank you for your incredible support, but unfortunately, YouTube has completely disabled our channel's monetization, leaving us without the budget to continue operations. Because of this, we are forced to stop uploading new videos here in the near future and will fully transition our work over to Patreon. If you enjoyed today's story, please support us by joining the Boss Revenge Stories Patreon, where you will find exclusive, true stories that are even better and much longer. Over there, we explore highly detailed situations that we simply cannot make public on YouTube, brought to life by a cast of multiple emotional voice actors within a single story. You can join us right now by scanning the QR code on your screen or by clicking the Patreon link in the video description or the pinned comments. Now, let us dive right into today's tale of corporate betrayal, where I, Chloe Bennett, learned exactly how ruthless the financial world can be. The wind cutting off Lake Michigan was brutal, but the chill inside the Chicago headquarters of Nexus Horizon Equities was always colder. I am 35 years old, and I am the lead quantitative analyst for this firm. For 2 solid years, my life consisted of cold coffee, glowing monitors, and absolute zero sleep. I sacrificed my weekends, my holidays, and my sanity to build Project Oracle. Oracle was not just a basic trading algorithm. It was a highly advanced artificial intelligence designed to predict market volatility with terrifying, surgical precision. It was my absolute masterpiece, a system capable of reading market sentiment faster than any human alive. It was exactly 6 o'clock in the morning on our official launch day. The massive trading floor was completely empty, bathed in the pale blue light of sleeping computer terminals. My heels clicked loudly against the polished marble floor as I walked purposefully toward the main server room. Today was the day Nexus Horizon would become untouchable in the financial sector. Today was supposed to be my coronation. I reached the reinforced steel door and pressed my thumb firmly against the biometric scanner. A sharp beep echoed in the quiet hallway. The security LED ring flashed angry red. Access denied. I frowned. I wiped my thumb on my heavy wool coat and pressed it against the glass reader again. Red. Access denied. A cold knot formed deep in my stomach. I pulled out my mobile phone and tried to log directly into the remote server to check the master directory. My screen instantly flashed a fatal error message. Account disabled. Administrator privileges revoked. My blood turned to ice. Someone had intentionally locked me out of my own system. I did not panic. I got incredibly angry. I turned on my heel and marched straight toward the executive suite. Preston Vance, our chief executive officer, sat in his expansive glass-walled office. The man looked like he belonged on the deck of a luxury yacht, not managing a high-stakes server farm. His tailored Italian suit cost more than most regular people made in an entire year. He was casually sipping an espresso, staring out through the floor-to-ceiling windows at the waking Chicago skyline. I pushed the heavy glass door open without bothering to knock. "Preston, the biometric security system is malfunctioning," I said, keeping my voice dangerously level. "And my administrative access to Oracle is completely locked." Preston did not even flinch. He slowly turned his expensive leather chair to face me. He set his porcelain espresso cup down on his solid oak desk. He looked at me with a deeply patronizing smile. The exact kind of smile you give a foolish child who just dropped their ice cream on the pavement. "It is not a malfunction, Chloe," he said smoothly, his voice devoid of any warmth. "I ordered the IT department to revoke your security credentials at midnight." The large room suddenly seemed to shrink. I stepped closer to his desk, my hands balling into tight fists. "Excuse me? Oracle launches in exactly 3 hours. I need to run the final calibration sequence. You cannot lock the lead quant out of the source code on launch day. You are no longer the project lead for Oracle, Preston replied, casually folding his hands together on the desk. He sounded as if we were discussing a mundane lunch order, not the culmination of my life's work. We are restructuring the development team. The board of directors and I have decided to take the project in a different, much more dynamic direction. A different direction? I repeated, my voice rising in disbelief. I wrote every single line of that architecture. I built the complex predictive models from scratch. You cannot just hand my 2 years of grueling work to someone else. Actually, I can, Preston sneered, completely dropping his polite facade. You are just an employee. Chloe, you are a cog in my machine. And right now, my machine needs a much different face. We are preparing for a massive initial public offering in 6 months. Wall Street investors do not want to see a tired, 35-year-old code monkey answering questions on financial news networks. They want youth. They want vibrant energy. They want a fresh, media-friendly face that sells the grand illusion of cutting-edge innovation. Before I could tear into his pathetic, sexist reasoning, the door behind me clicked open. The heavy, suffocating scent of cheap floral perfume immediately filled the air. I turned around. Standing there in the doorway was Tiffany Blake. She was the 23-year-old marketing intern we had hired just 3 months ago. She did not know the difference between a complex Python script and a garden snake. She spent her workdays organizing catering for board meetings and posting pictures on the company's social media accounts. Tiffany strutted proudly into the executive office wearing a tight designer dress that completely ignored the company dress code. She walked right past me and stood intimately close next to Preston. In her manicured hand, she held a sleek silver external hard drive. It was the master drive containing the unencrypted source code for Project Oracle. "Good morning, Preston," she purred, flashing a blinding, triumphant smile. She casually placed her hand on his shoulder, her fingers lingering just a second too long. The implication of their relationship was as subtle as a sledgehammer hitting glass. "Ah, Tiffany," Preston beamed, his eyes tracing her silhouette with obvious hunger. "Chloe, I want you to meet the new director of Project Oracle. Tiffany will be handling all press releases, investor relations, and operational oversight moving forward." I stared blankly at the two of them. It was a brazen daylight robbery. He was stealing a billion-dollar asset to pay for his sleazy office romance. Tiffany looked at me, her wide eyes filled with sickening mock sympathy. "Do not worry, Chloe," Tiffany said, her voice dripping with venomous sweetness. "I will make sure your little coding project gets the bright spotlight it truly deserves. You can go back to your desk now. Preston and I have a lot of big decisions to make today." My jaw clenched so hard, my teeth ached. The absolute audacity of these two was staggering. They really thought they had won. They thought they could strip me of my title, steal my code, and toss me aside like yesterday's garbage without consequence. I looked at the silver hard drive in Tiffany's delicate hand. Then I looked at Preston's arrogant, smug face. I did not scream. I did not throw a tantrum. I just took a deep, stabilizing breath. They had the code, but they had absolutely no idea what kind of monster they were actually holding. I walked out of the executive suite with a perfectly blank expression. By the time I reached the main trading floor, the morning shift had arrived. The space was humming with the low, nervous energy of a high-stakes launch day. Dozens of analysts and junior developers were huddled around their curved monitors. But the moment they saw me carrying an empty cardboard box from the supply closet, the typing suddenly stopped. The whispers started instantly. They rippled through the aisles like a sudden breeze over dry grass. In the cutthroat ecosystem of Chicago finance, weakness was blood in the water. My colleagues stared at me with a mixture of pity and predatory relief. They truly believed they were watching the spectacular death of a career. They thought the brilliant female engineer had finally been broken by the boys' club. I methodically began placing my personal items into the box: my mechanical keyboard, a framed photograph of my dog, a vintage slide rule my grandfather gave me. I did not rush. I did not let my hands tremble. The initial burning fury that had consumed me in the glass office was rapidly evaporating, replaced by a deep, absolute, terrifying clarity. I was a mathematician. I did not operate on emotion. I operated on logic, variables, and inevitable outcomes. Right as I placed my favorite coffee mug into the box, a simultaneous notification chime echoed across the entire floor. Hundreds of phones and computer terminals pinged in unison. The company-wide email had arrived. I opened my inbox. The subject line read, "A bold new vision for Project Oracle." It was a masterpiece of corporate arrogance, drafted by Preston himself. In 3 bloated paragraphs, he officially announced that our marketing intern was now the sole project director for the firm's most powerful asset. But it was the final paragraph that made my heart slow to a calm, steady rhythm. Preston, in his desperate need to look like a visionary leader to the board of directors, had written the following words: "I proudly take 100% of the responsibility for this groundbreaking restructuring. I have personally authorized this transfer of leadership to ensure our algorithm reflects the modern, aggressive spirit of our upcoming initial public offering." A small, genuine smile touched the corners of my mouth. I read the sentence again, committing it to memory. Preston was a phenomenal salesman. He could sell ice to a blizzard. He knew how to charm venture capitalists, how to wear a bespoke suit, and how to manipulate optics. But underneath that expensive haircut, he was fundamentally ignorant of the intricate, unforgiving machinery that actually ran Wall Street. He had completely forgotten about the federal securities laws. To legally operate a live, autonomous trading artificial intelligence that manages real investor capital, the individual named as the project director is strictly required by the government to hold active regulatory licenses. Specifically, they must possess a Series 86 and a Series 87 license from the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority. Earning those credentials requires passing grueling, mathematically complex federal examinations. I spent 6 agonizing months studying to earn mine. The intern whose only qualification was organizing office catering absolutely did not have a Series 86 license. By officially transferring operational control of a live algorithmic fund to an unlicensed individual and documenting it in a company-wide email, Preston had not just made a bad management decision, he had committed a severe, undeniable federal financial crime. But the legal violation was merely the appetizer. The main course was buried deep inside the millions of lines of code they had just stolen. When you build an artificial intelligence capable of executing thousands of high-frequency trades per second, you never leave it completely unsupervised. Markets are irrational. If an unprecedented global event occurred, a rogue algorithm could wipe out $1 billion in less than 4 minutes. To prevent that, I built a heavily encrypted, mandatory safety protocol into Oracle's core architecture. It was a dead man's switch. Every single trading day, at exactly 12 noon, the system required a highly complex, dynamic calibration code to be manually entered into the master terminal. This cipher was mathematically generated in my own mind, changing daily based on a prime number sequence only I knew. Without that specific daily input, Oracle's logic pathways would assume the system had been compromised or that the market data was being manipulated. If the clock struck 12 noon and the calibration code was missing, Oracle was programmed to instantly shift from aggressive profit generation into a protocol I called extreme self-defense. It would lock out all external users and begin systematically liquidating and reversing positions to protect the core capital. Operating purely on scorched earth survival logic, Preston thought he had acquired a docile, money-making machine. He did not realize I had coded a digital apex predator. I picked up my cardboard box and tucked it under my arm. I did not look back at the whisperings analysts or the glowing screens. I walked calmly toward the elevator banks, my posture perfectly straight, as the heavy steel doors slid shut, separating me from the company I had helped build. I felt a profound sense of peace. Preston had just ripped the pin out of a live grenade, proudly handed it to a toddler, and locked himself in a soundproof vault. All I had to do now was wait for the explosion. Once outside the glass fortress of Nexus Horizon, the freezing Chicago wind hit my face. I did not pull out my phone to draft a frantic email to human resources. I did not attempt to contact the board of directors. Corporate human resources departments exist solely to protect the executive suite from liability, and right now, Preston Vance was their golden child. The board members were even worse. They were a collection of ancient, out-of-touch investors, completely mesmerized by Preston's promises of a highly lucrative initial public offering. Complaining to them would be a massive waste of time. They would just smile condescendingly, tell me to be a team player, and have security escort me off the premises. They were merely pawns on Preston's chessboard. I needed the person who actually owned the board. I crossed the busy avenue and walked into an artisanal coffee shop located directly opposite our corporate headquarters. The shop was warm and smelled heavily of roasted beans and expensive pastries. I approached the counter, ordered a double espresso, and found a quiet, elevated table by the front window. Through the thick glass, I had a perfect, unobstructed view of the Nexus Horizon entrance and the executive floors above. I sat down, placed my cardboard box on the floor, and retrieved my phone. I bypassed my normal contacts list and dialed a highly restricted, unlisted international number. I was calling Marcus Thorne. In the global financial underworld, Marcus Thorne was essentially a ghost, but a ghost who wielded godlike power. He was a notoriously reclusive billionaire, a man utterly devoid of sentimentality or patience. More importantly, his private equity firm provided 70% of the total liquid capital that kept Nexus Horizon running. He was our largest single shareholder. Preston liked to strut around the office pretending he was the undisputed king of the company. But Marcus Thorne literally owned the ground Preston walked on. Marcus did not care about media-friendly faces. He did not care about marketing campaigns or office politics. He cared exclusively about mathematical precision, unyielding compliance, and cold, hard profit. The line rang exactly twice before a voice answered. It was deep, rough, and completely stripped of any polite inflection. "Speak," Marcus commanded. "Marcus, this is Chloe Bennett," I said, keeping my tone as flat and clinical as a surgeon reading a patient's chart. "I am officially notifying you that as of 9 o'clock this morning, Preston Vance has unilaterally terminated my administrative access and removed me as the lead quantitative analyst for Project Oracle." There was a brief, heavy pause on the other end of the line. "And who exactly is managing my capital right now?" "Tiffany Blake," I answered evenly. "A 23-year-old marketing intern. Preston just officially transferred operational control of a $500 million algorithmic trading fund to an individual who does not possess a Series 86 or a Series 87 regulatory license." I could hear the faint, sharp sound of a pen snapping in half on his end of the line. I did not give him a chance to ask questions. I pressed my tactical advantage, delivering the precise, lethal facts without a single trace of emotion. By placing an unlicensed, uncertified employee in charge of a live algorithmic trading desk, Preston has directly violated federal securities regulations. This is not a gray area. Marcus, it is a severe criminal offense. The federal authorities will dismantle the firm if they find out. But the legal exposure is actually your secondary problem. "Give me the primary problem, Chloe," Marcus demanded. His voice dropped an octave, radiating an intense, freezing pressure that would have terrified any other executive. "Oracle is not a passive system," I explained, staring out the window at the towering glass building across the street. "It requires a manual dynamic calibration sequence to be injected into the root directory at exactly 12 noon every single trading day. I am the only person on this planet who knows how to mathematically generate that sequence. The intern currently sitting in the director's chair cannot even write a basic command line prompt." "What happens at 12 noon?" Marcus asked, his tone turning dangerously quiet. "If the cipher is not entered, the artificial intelligence will register the absence of its creator as a hostile takeover," I stated clearly. "It will instantly trigger a fail-safe protocol I designed called Extreme Self-Defense. The system will aggressively lock all administrative terminals. Then, it will begin automatically liquidating assets and shorting the firm's own positions to protect the core algorithm from perceived corruption. In short, Marcus, at exactly 12 noon today, Oracle is going to start setting your $500 million on fire, and Preston will have absolutely no way to stop it." I waited for the eruption. I expected the billionaire to start shouting, to threaten massive lawsuits, or to demand I run back into the building and fix the code immediately. Instead, the absolute silence stretched on for several excruciating seconds. When Marcus finally spoke, his voice was terrifyingly calm, carrying the unmistakable weight of impending violence.
"Where are you right now?" he asked.
I am sitting in the coffee shop directly across the street from the Nexus Horizon main lobby, I replied, taking a slow breath. Sit tight, Marcus commanded, his tone sharp and decisive. Drink your coffee and enjoy the show. The line went completely dead. I slowly lowered the phone from my ear, picked up my dark espresso, and fixed my eyes on the glass building. The game board was perfectly set, and the executioner was on his way. The trading floor of Nexus Horizon had been transformed into a theatrical stage. I could see the glaring television lights clearly from my seat in the cafe. It was exactly 11:45. Preston had invited reporters from major financial networks, local business journalists, and the entire senior board of directors to witness his triumph. Waiters were actually circling the perimeter carrying silver trays of champagne flutes. It was a grotesque display of premature victory. Standing at the center podium was Tiffany, beaming brightly under the camera flashes. She was positioned directly in front of the massive primary terminal screen, which was currently displaying a serene, pulsing blue graphic that I had designed to represent the dormant state of the algorithm. At exactly 1 minute to 12 noon, Preston stepped up to the microphone. Even from across the street, I could easily imagine his smooth baritone voice echoing across the floor, delivering rehearsed buzzwords about synergy, the future of automated wealth generation, and passing the torch to a new generation of dynamic leadership. He gestured expansively toward Tiffany. The digital clock on the wall above the servers flipped to 12 noon. Tiffany dramatically placed her manicured finger on the glowing enter key. She pressed it, officially launching the system into the live market as a grand public relations stunt. For 3 seconds, absolutely nothing happened. The system was frantically searching its root directory for the mathematical cipher. It was looking for my daily calibration code. When it found only an empty void, the artificial intelligence immediately recognized the breach. The logic gates slammed shut. The core protocol shifted seamlessly from aggressive wealth generation to immediate asset protection. It designated the current internal command structure as a hostile, unauthorized threat. The massive blue screen hanging over the trading floor violently flashed pure, blinding red. Then, a cascading waterfall of warning notifications began rapidly scrolling down the monitors. The high-frequency trading engine roared to life, but it was not buying undervalued tech stocks or hedging commodities. To protect its capital from a perceived hostile takeover, Oracle initiated a massive, relentless campaign of short selling. It targeted the most vulnerable asset it could find. It began aggressively dumping and shorting the public stock of Nexus Horizon Equities itself. Red warning lights, usually reserved for catastrophic market crashes, began spinning on the ceiling of the trading floor. Sirens blared so loudly I imagined the glass panes of the building vibrating. Within the first 60 seconds, Oracle executed over 40,000 automated trades. The company's stock price plummeted. $5 million of market capitalization evaporated, then $10 million, then $25 million. The algorithm was cannibalizing the firm at the speed of light. From my vantage point, the pristine trading floor instantly turned into a chaotic war zone. Journalists dropped their champagne glasses. Board members grabbed their chests in horror. Preston lunged forward, physically shoving a cameraman out of the way to reach the main console. He grabbed Tiffany by the shoulders of her expensive designer dress and shook her violently. I could not hear the words, but his face was contorted in absolute raw panic. He was screaming at her to engage the manual override. He was demanding that she execute a kill switch to sever the connection to the external exchanges. Tiffany froze completely. She stared blindly at the thousands of lines of aggressive red code flying across the terminal. She did not know what a command line was. She did not know how to bypass a firewalled proxy. She burst into hysterical tears, her hands hovering uselessly over the keyboard. She tried pressing the escape key repeatedly, a pathetic, childish attempt to stop a billion-dollar machine. Preston violently pushed her aside, throwing her to the floor in his desperation. He began furiously slamming his hands against the keyboard, entering random commands, which only caused the system to lock him out further. Realizing that his new project director was completely useless and his company was bleeding to death by the second, Preston abandoned the podium. He sprinted wildly across the floor, dodging terrified junior analysts who were running in every direction like a kicked anthill. He locked himself inside his glass office. A second later, my mobile phone, resting quietly on the wooden cafe table, lit up. The screen displayed his name. I watched it vibrate. I did not pick it up. It went to voicemail. Immediately, the phone rang again, and again, and again. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my espresso. The dark roast was bitter and absolutely perfect. After the fifth missed call, I tapped the screen to listen to the voicemails on speakerphone, keeping the volume low. "Chloe, pick up the phone!" Preston screamed into the receiver, his voice cracking with sheer terror. The background noise of the siren was deafening. "The system is malfunctioning. It is dumping our own stock. Tiffany does not know how to stop it. You have to come back up here right now and shut it down. I will double your salary. I will pay you a $1 million bonus today. Just get back here." The next voicemail arrived exactly 30 seconds later. The arrogance was completely gone, replaced by the pathetic whimpering of a broken man. "Chloe, please, I am begging you. The board is going to kill me. We are down $40 million. I will give you your job back. I will fire Tiffany right now. I will give you 3 times your salary and 5% equity in the entire firm. I will give you whatever you want. Please, Chloe. The federal regulators are going to notice the volume. I am going to go to federal prison. Answer the phone." I let the voicemails play back to back, a sweet symphony of absolute destruction. I sat comfortably in the warm, jazz-filled cafe, resting my chin on my hand. Through the thick glass, I watched the spectacular downfall of a Wall Street tyrant. The red emergency lights from his office bathed his sweating, panicked face as he paced back and forth, tearing at his expensive hair. Nexus Horizon was burning to the ground, exactly as I had programmed it to, and my phone remained firmly on silent. It was exactly 1:30 in the afternoon. The financial hemorrhage had been draining the lifeblood of Nexus Horizon for an hour and a half. I remained seated in the quiet cafe across the street, watching the disaster unfold. Suddenly, the chaotic scene outside the glass building shifted. A motorcade of 4 heavily armored, matte black sport utility vehicles slammed their brakes, screeching to a violent halt directly in front of the main entrance. The doors flew open in perfect military synchronization. Out stepped Marcus Thorne. He wore a sharply tailored charcoal suit, his face a mask of absolute, terrifying indifference. Behind him emerged a phalanx of imposing corporate lawyers, carrying thick briefcases, flanked by heavily built private security contractors. They did not pause at the front desk. They did not scan their identification badges. When a uniformed lobby guard raised a trembling hand to stop them, one of the massive security contractors simply pushed him aside with the casual force of a moving freight train. They moved through the lobby like a localized hurricane, bringing the brutal reality of the financial underworld straight to the executive floor. Thanks to a panicked junior analyst who had started live streaming the disaster on social media, I was able to watch the internal feed directly on my phone. The camera feed shook wildly as Marcus Thorne strode onto the massive trading floor. The blaring sirens and the flashing red warning lights did not make him flinch. He completely ignored the terrified board members clutching their chests and the journalists scrambling for cover. He walked with a singular, lethal purpose straight toward the reinforced glass doors of the primary server room. The biometric lock was still engaged, angrily flashing red. Marcus did not ask for a security keycard. He did not demand passwords. He simply turned to a nearby emergency glass cabinet, shattered the pane with his bare fist, and pulled out the heavy steel fire axe with 3 brutal, echoing swings. He obliterated the electronic locking mechanism and kicked the heavy steel door open. He marched directly into the freezing server room, grabbed the massive bundle of primary power cables feeding the mainframe, and violently ripped them straight out of the wall. Blue sparks exploded into the air. The massive server racks whined in sudden agony as the cooling fans died. Instantly, the giant red monitors across the trading floor went completely black. The deafening emergency sirens finally choked and fell silent. Marcus Thorne had manually severed the connection, deliberately accepting a permanent, unrecoverable loss of $40 million just to instantly cauterize the wound and save his remaining capital. The sudden silence on the trading floor was infinitely more terrifying than the screaming sirens. Preston Vance slowly emerged from his shattered glass office. His face was the color of wet ash. His incredibly expensive Italian suit was rumpled, completely soaked through with panicked sweat. He stumbled toward Marcus, his hands raised in a pathetic, pleading gesture of surrender. "Marcus, thank God you are here," Preston stammered, his voice shaking violently as he desperately tried to rewrite the narrative. It was sabotage. It was Chloe Bennett. She planted a malicious virus in the core architecture before she was terminated. She deliberately corrupted the algorithm out of spite. Tiffany and I were just trying to isolate the damage. We did absolutely everything we could to protect your financial assets. Marcus slowly turned around. He casually dropped the heavy fire axe onto the polished marble floor. The metallic clang echoed sharply across the silent room. He did not yell. He did not show a single ounce of anger. True power never needs to raise its voice. Marcus reached into his tailored jacket, pulled out his mobile device, and tapped the screen once. He held it up high for the entire room to hear. A cold, synthetic voice assistant began reading the text of an email at maximum volume. It was the exact company-wide email Preston had sent at 9 o'clock in the morning. The digital voice echoed across the frozen trading floor. "I proudly take 100% of the responsibility for this groundbreaking restructuring. I have personally authorized this transfer of leadership to ensure our algorithm reflects the modern, aggressive spirit of our upcoming initial public offering." Marcus lowered the device. He stared at Preston with eyes as cold and dead as deep space. "You took full legal responsibility. Preston, you deliberately put an uncredentialed, unlicensed child in control of my money." Marcus turned his head and gestured lazily with his left hand. Instantly, two of the massive security contractors moved toward Tiffany Blake. She was cowering behind a wooden trading desk, dark mascara running heavily down her cheeks, desperately clutching her company-issued laptop to her chest. "Take her electronics," Marcus ordered, his voice devoid of any human empathy. "She is an unverified security risk." The men did not hesitate for a fraction of a second. One of them grabbed the silver laptop from her hands with bruising force, while the other confiscated her mobile phone right out of her designer purse. Tiffany shrieked loudly, protesting that the phone was her personal property, but they completely ignored her cries. The contractors grabbed her forcefully by the arms and dragged her roughly toward the elevator banks. She kicked and sobbed hysterically, her humiliation absolute and entirely public. She was violently thrown out of the corporate building, her unearned career completely destroyed before it had ever truly begun. I finished the last drop of my espresso and gently set the ceramic cup down on the saucer. Through the cafe window, I saw one of Marcus Thorne's massive security contractors deliberately cross the avenue, stopping the busy afternoon traffic with a simple raise of his hand. He walked into the coffee shop, approached my table, and gave a brief, respectful nod. It was time. The walk back into the Nexus Horizon building was entirely different from my departure. I was flanked by private security, the lobby guards, who had looked away when I was essentially fired this morning, now stared at the marble floor as I passed. When the elevator doors opened onto the primary trading floor, the silence was absolute and suffocating. The massive monitors were completely dead. The junior analysts and senior traders stood frozen by their desks. Every single pair of eyes tracked my movement. They watched in stunned, breathless disbelief as the woman they thought had been destroyed walked straight toward the executive boardroom with the untouchable billionaire's personal escort. The heavy mahogany doors of the boardroom were already open. The air inside was thick and incredibly tense. Preston Vance was completely collapsed into a leather chair at the far end of the long table. His bespoke suit jacket was crumpled on the floor. His tie was violently loosened, and sweat poured heavily down his pale face. Standing over him were three grim men wearing dark navy windbreakers with bright yellow letters printed on the back. They were federal agents from the Securities and Exchange Commission, and they had just arrived to investigate an unprecedented, catastrophic volume of unauthorized trading. I walked calmly to the center of the room. I did not raise my voice. I reached into my leather tote bag, pulled out a thick, legally bound manila folder, and tossed it onto the polished wooden table. It landed with a heavy, definitive thud right in front of Preston. "What is this?" Preston croaked, his voice barely a whisper, staring at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. "That is your absolute ruin," I replied clearly. "When I was hired at Nexus Horizon Equities, Human Resources used a standard, outdated employment contract. It was a sloppy oversight by your legal department. My contract strictly outlined my salary and my non-disclosure agreements, but it completely lacked a standard intellectual property assignment clause. It never stated that the company automatically owned any personal algorithms I developed during my tenure." Preston's bloodshot eyes widened in absolute horror. He slowly realized what I was saying, but I refused to let him interrupt. 3 months ago, I quietly registered the entire core architecture and the source code of Project Oracle under an anonymous corporate holding company in Delaware. I explained, my tone surgical and cold. I own it, 100% of it. Nexus Horizon never owned a single line of that code. When you confidently locked me out of the system this morning and proudly handed the master drive to your uncredentialed intern, you did not just reassign a company project. You committed corporate espionage and grand larceny. You stole $1 billion privately owned asset. The senior federal agent picked up the folder, briefly reviewing the certified patent documents and the stamped registration certificates. He gave a firm nod to Marcus Thorne, confirming that every single word I said was legally binding. Preston let out a pathetic, suffocated gasp. He looked wildly around the room, desperately seeking a lifeline that did not exist. Marcus Thorne stepped out of the shadows at the edge of the room. His presence was completely overwhelming. "According to the terms of your executive compensation package, Preston, any act of gross moral turpitude or severe ethical violation results in immediate termination," Marcus declared, his voice cutting through the room like a frozen blade. "You just committed federal securities fraud. You knowingly operated an unlicensed algorithmic desk, and you blatantly stole private intellectual property. I am officially activating the penalty clause. Every single share of equity you hold is instantly forfeited. Your bonuses are completely zeroed out. Your severance is void. You are officially bankrupt." Before Preston could even attempt to form a defense, two agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, who had been waiting quietly in the corridor, stepped into the boardroom. They pulled Preston out of his chair with aggressive efficiency. "Preston Vance, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit securities fraud and corporate theft," the agent stated firmly. The sharp metallic click of the steel handcuffs echoing in the silent boardroom was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Preston did not struggle. His spirit was completely shattered. He was practically dragged out of the room, crying softly, an absolute shell of the arrogant tyrant who had smiled at me just a few hours earlier. As the heavy doors closed behind the federal agents, Marcus turned to face me. The terrifying billionaire actually offered a faint, respectful smile. He reached into his tailored jacket, pulled out a pristine, single-page legal document, and slid it across the table toward me. "Nexus Horizon is currently bleeding," Marcus said quietly. "I need a leader who actually understands the machinery. I am offering you the permanent position of Chief Executive Officer. You will receive a massive equity stake in the firm, a base salary 3 times higher than the previous idiot, and we will pay your private holding company a highly lucrative licensing fee to legally utilize the Oracle algorithm." I looked at the contract. It was everything I had earned, finally placed in front of me with the respect I deserved. I picked up a silver pen from the table and signed my name on the dotted line. I walked out of the boardroom and headed straight into the executive suite. I stood in front of the massive desk and slowly sat down in the luxurious leather CEO chair. It was still slightly warm from Preston's panicked sweating. Marcus followed me into the office, watching quietly. I pulled my laptop from my bag, connected it to the secure master terminal on the desk, and rapidly typed a single, heavily encrypted command line. Instantly, the dead monitors outside on the trading floor flickered to life. The angry red emergency lights were entirely replaced by a beautiful, calming, pulsing green glow. The billion-dollar system was breathing again, perfectly stable and under my complete control. I leaned back in my new chair, laced my fingers together, and smiled confidently at Marcus. Let us start cleaning up this garbage. It was the ultimate truth of the corporate world. Empty charisma and arrogance can steal the spotlight for a fleeting moment, but true, undeniable talent will always hold the ultimate power. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. We truly appreciate your time and your dedication to our channel. Where in the world are you tuning in from today? Please let us know down in the comments section, as we mentioned at the beginning of this broadcast, because YouTube has completely disabled our monetization. We can no longer afford to operate on this platform and will be halting all new uploads in the very near future. We are officially moving our entire operation to Patreon. If you found today's story thrilling and want to help us survive, please support us by joining the Boss Revenge Stories Patreon community. Over there, you will get exclusive access to our absolute best, most intense true stories that are simply too detailed and too controversial to be made public on YouTube. You can scan the QR code currently displayed on your screen right now, or simply click the Patreon link provided in the video description and the pinned comment. Thank you for standing by us. And we will see you on the other side.